Hi honey bunnies, I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to sip some beer and talk through some rambled, jumbled insights and ideas and points of conversation with regard to my own spiritual journey and kind of the genesis of my spiritual journey and where it is now, and certain things that I kind of find to be points of interest when I talk to other people who are on kind of I wouldn't say a nondescript spiritual journey, but distinctly a spiritual journey rather than a religious journey, if you get my meaning. The things that I tend to bring up with people when I'm in discussions with them, if they have a spiritual practice, or indeed if they do feel that they're living their life through that spiritual lens, with that sense of spiritual perspective, these are the things that kind of come up for me, and also questions that people have asked me that I've kind of answered in conversation that I think it would be really interesting to get insights from other people. I do occasionally do these more kind of rambly videos where I just kind of allow myself to talk about my own journey without any kind of instructional standpoint to it. And hopefully this will be of interest to some people, and maybe it will even be helpful to some people depending on where you are on your spiritual journey and so on. So I'm not sure what I'm going to title this video yet, not sure exactly what it's going to include, but I wanted to start really by talking about my sense of humour and my sense of spiritual seriousness / solemnity. I'm quite sure that I went through a definite phase when I was younger of, I can't exactly say what age, but I'm 30 now, so at some point through my 20s for definite, I went through a stage where I didn't really want to talk too much about my spiritual journey. I mean, I'm not a big talker about spiritual stuff in terms of my journey now. It's only if it comes up and it's a mutually agreed topic. It's not like I want to bash people over the head with my spiritual journey and my spiritual insights and stuff. It's really my own thing. But I would say there is a definite point during my 20s where I actually wanted to avoid at any cost talking about my spiritual kind of standpoint, because I always really wanted people to think of me as somebody who was rational and logical and had a basis in science, and not as somebody who was kind of like airy-fairy and woo-woo and all of that kind of thing. And I know this is something a lot of people have gone through in their own lives, where they kind of feel like, you know, without having the time to sit down and talk through the nuanced complexity of your spiritual journey and the reasons why it's set up like it is and stuff, a lot of the stuff that goes on in your spiritual journey might seem really woo-woo and really far out there, and actually you kind of don't want to present it in a way that might end up having you judged harshly by kind of people who might see your journey as woo-woo or out there or kind of not respectable, or a sign that you are in some sense kind of like vapid or fickle or whatever it may be. And so I think I gave other people a lot of power, especially like militant atheists and such. I think I gave those people, and cynics in general, people who are cynical about spirituality and religion, people who think they're above it, people who actually use it as a point of superiority in their own kind of narrative. I let those people have way too much of me, you know. I really let them have control over what I said and what I was willing to talk about and stuff. I even remember once or twice in my mid-20s cringing when somebody who knew me quite well would say in a conversation, "Oh, well, Kelly's a pagan, Kelly goes to Stonehenge regularly, don't you?" kind of thing. And it would be in front of people that I didn't know that well, and I didn't know what their spiritual perspective was, and I wasn't necessarily comfortable with being outed in front of people who might potentially judge me harshly or think of me as, you know, flaky and woo-woo and out there and all the rest of it. I would never ever give that consideration the time of day, you know, at this point in my life. But there were times where I kind of felt that way. And there were also times where, when I was younger, when I kind of, I just needed to loosen it up a little bit more, I think. And I think it kind of comes with time and with wisdom and with being able to kind of really own what I'm doing as a witch and as a spiritual being and so on, that I'm now kind of able to not only be much more relaxed and much more open and talk about stuff to do with my spiritual journey in conversation with people if it does come up, even if I've never met them before, even if we're just at a party or a gathering or a barbecue and, you know, we're just drinking and chatting. If it comes up, I've gotten to that point where I'm really kind of loose and flowing with it now. I don't have those hang-ups. I really have gotten to the point in my journey where I feel like if other people would be willing to judge me harshly based on my beliefs, then that would be their issue and that would be their shit to deal with, and it wouldn't have anything to do with me. you know, even I think at one point in the past, when I was younger, I probably would have been like devastated by Stephen Fry's recent interview in which he kind of poo-pooed people who believe in, who talk about energy, or who talk about, you know, or I mean, he was very kind of cutting about it. He was like, well, I suppose if you want to hold a crystal, you know, if that makes you feel better, then that's fine, kind of thing. Back in the day, I would have been like, oh no, you know, like, Stephen Fry doesn't respect me. And nowadays, like, at the age of 30, I'm like, give a fuck. I really don't care at all. To each their own. And I'm so comfortable with where I am on my spiritual journey, and I don't think there's anything to kind of get out of my nest about, you know. And I think if people were going to judge me on that basis, the same way as kind of I had to go through this whole thing about whether or not I wanted to walk around with short sleeves on, because I do have scar tissue on my arms, and I realised that one of the main reasons that I would avoid doing that or potentially consider not doing that is because of people's potential judgments of me. And then in the end I came to this point, this fork in the road, where I was like, so really it's just a bullshit filter then, you know. If people would judge you as a certain kind of person based on something you did to yourself years ago when you were horrendously depressed, then, you know, they're not the kind of people that you want in your life anyway. They're the kind of people that you would want to keep at arm's length anyway, that wouldn't have maybe a deeper or more invested stake in your life, and that's okay. You know, why would you want them to? So why does it matter ultimately? And that was the kind of fork in the road that I had to come to with my spiritual journey too. And owning it, being able to own it is a really beautiful thing. I would say when it comes to my relationship with the broom closet, that's kind of a little bit of a different thing altogether from talking about myself as a spiritualist. Actually talking about myself as a witch, that's been a different kind of road for me. I've never come out of the broom closet to my family. I've never come out of the broom closet to my mother. I've never said, Mum, you know, I'm a witch, right? Like, it doesn't work like that. She knows. She knows. She's always said to me, you know, when I was 14, 15, 16, 17, like, if I would have kind of an instance of precognition or, you know, anything like that, or if I buy something a little bit out there, or I'd have certain books I was reading and she'd say, oh, you're so witchy, or oh, that was really witchy what you just did, or kind of, and she'd talk about people in my family who had certain gifts for certain things or were interested in certain things, and she'd talk about our culture and our heritage, both, you know, in the spiritual sense and in terms of certain ancestors who shared certain gifts and abilities with me or whatever. I mean, she's very open to it, and she's very open to alternative spirituality. I never felt like I needed to make that into a discussion. I've never come out of the broom closet to my siblings, but I would never mind if they've seen witchcraft books on my shelves. They always have. They know I'm into that stuff. They know I read tarot. They're both aware that I have this channel. I don't know if they sit down and watch anything on this channel, but they know it's here. It's all the information is there for them should they choose to go out there and find it. You know, so it's never really been one of those things that the word itself does involve a certain amount of complexity and a certain amount of confusion, based primarily around things like, you know, the fact that witch is synonymous with like Harry Potter and fantasy, and people with no kind of working knowledge of witchcraft and paganism may not understand necessarily how it fits in any other way. Over on the other side of the pond in America, obviously Christianity is still very much a growing and dominant and very kind of present religion, whereas over here it's very secular and it's pretty much like, you know, you do what you want to do in the comfort of your own home, but very few people know anyone really who goes to church. I mean, I don't know anyone who knows anyone who goes to church regularly. I know people that go with their families at Christmas sometimes, but, you know, I don't know anyone who knows anyone who's a practicing Christian. And if they are, they're certainly not certainly not being very Pentecostal and evangelical and all that about it. You know, it's not how it goes across here in England. So we don't have that same issue with the word witch in that sense, but we do have the issue with people not really knowing how to place it culturally or spiritually in terms of significance, because it seems like something that you'd read about in a book or that you'd see in a film. So that's kind of problematic. But in terms of feeling like I need to come out, Not really. And to be honest with you, if I was going to explain my spirituality to people, I would always say pagan. I would never say witch anyway, because people have way more of a cultural understanding and a general kind of, you know, something that they've taken through via kind of the osmosis of general consensus with regard to paganism. So it would take much less explaining, and it's more specific anyway. You know, I'm only a witch because I'm a pagan. My witchcraft is intimately connected to my sense of who I am as a pagan. So it's really pagan that would be the word that I'd have to bamboozle people with rather than necessarily witch. I have a real sense of humour about my spirituality. I laugh about my spirituality, but I laugh with people about it. I would never ever stand for somebody laughing at me. You know, they just would not be permitted to be in my presence again. If it were, I mean, nothing like that's ever happened to me. But with regard to my friends and stuff, like, we joke about it, you know. And I will laugh about it. I don't know if many of you remember seeing the video that I did with, the first video that I did with my boyfriend Danny, but we laughed and joked about, you know, using rose quartz to heal constipation, like sitting with it on the toilet or whatever. And I do laugh about it. I talk about, like, my best friend, she's tattooed from head to toe and she's really into hip hop, and we often replace, like, hip hop lyrics with stuff to do with witchcraft, like things just ain't the same for witches and stuff like that. And she often like asks me if I'm going to do a drive-by hexing and stuff like that. It's just, we're just funny about it, you know. It's amusing, and I do kind of make light of it, but at the same time everybody in my life is very aware that it's very important. The people that are close to me in my life, that live with me, that I would consider to be close friends of mine, they're aware that it's an important part of my life, that I take it very seriously. And, you know, I don't think of seriousness and solemnity as being the same thing. I don't think of there being any need for spirituality to be steeped in solemnity and seriousness and all of that crap. I don't. Like, I'm a KO, and I like laughter in the circle, and I enjoy anything that is kind of ironic and tongue-in-cheek and funny, and you know, all of that kind of thing. I bring that into my spiritual journey and into my sacred circle, so why would I not bring it into the way that I converse with regard to my spirituality, the way that I talk about it? So, you know, it is funny, and I think that it's cool to laugh about it at the same time as having it as a central part of my life. Lots of people are really surprised that I'm not an atheist. I think that throughout my personal life and in my personal history, two things that people have been quite surprised by is that I never went to university. So I never had, like, an official higher education. People are just, like, floored by that. Quite often I'll be asked, which university did you go to, rather than did you go to university, because people are just so sure that I will have gone through and gotten an ordinary kind of higher education. And the other thing people are surprised by is that I'm not an atheist. When people find out that I believe in God, that I believe in divinity, that I have a spiritual practice, and that I'm very serious about it, some people are really surprised by that. And quite often I've had people say, sorry, I don't mean to be rude, I mean, it's fine, it's just I would have thought that you would be an atheist. And I quite enjoy that. I quite enjoy that sense that I'm not what one would think of as, because it's all preconceived notions anyway, right? And they need to be kind of brought out of that stuff anyway, because it's just all stereotypes and it's all based on not a lot. So it's interesting for me in that sense, but I also just really enjoy it. I enjoy that aspect of surprising people, and I just think that's really interesting in a way. And as I've said in videos before, I've danced in atheist territory, but I've never ever described myself as an atheist. I've always known from a young age, since I could first think about it, that theology is my bag, and that it is partly my bag because I really think that there is something going on, and I'm connected to it, and I'm part of it, and I can take from it. I remember going through this time in the past where I was really kind of clarifying my spiritual beliefs, and I was letting myself go there with actually nailing things down and getting things clear in my mind. And pantheism was becoming a really big part of how I viewed the universe and my place within it. And it was a word that I kind of connected to, and I felt this sense of, like, yes, this is what I've been looking for, this is what I am. And then I felt like that conflicted and that collided in a really, like, difficult, sticky way with witchcraft, with my sense of myself as a witch. And I've always had this strong sense that I was a witch for years, you know. It's always been something, this word that I naturally applied to myself, that I really feel I'm living. What is associated with the energy of the word witch, I really feel I'm living that every day. So it was very difficult to get right with my sense of what I really think is going on with regard to divinity, and then think, oh fuck, that clashes completely with witchcraft. It clashes completely with that natural, organic sense of, you know, believing in directing energy and believing in the power of ritual and believing in all of this stuff and what it means. And it was actually Annika Garrett, that I came across her website when she was still very active in talking about the specifics of pantheism and certain pantheist thinkers in the past and such. And it was at the moment that I realised that she was a practising witch that I like breathed out, because I thought, this girl knows her shit, you know, she knows who Spinoza is, and she's a witch, so it's cool, it's fine, we can do this. Like, so it was almost like that she gave me a permission slip. I think sometimes in anyone's spiritual journey there's that sense of waiting for a permission slip, or kind of waiting to step on to a certain avenue and then thinking, can I, will I, do I, is it right? And then something comes along that kind of quashes your reservations, and you're like, oh, okay, it's fine, so I'm a pantheist witch, so that's fine. When I first started to watch videos from witches on YouTube, I started to get these recommendations, like video recommendations, and a lot of them would be, you know, helping me to plug into other witches and find them, and then find other witches through them, you know. The more that you watch videos about witchcraft, the more videos are recommended to you. But a lot of the recommendations were actually from Christian channels that were like warning people against the evils of witchcraft. And I know if you're a witch and you're hanging out in the YouTube pagan community, then you know, you've seen these videos, right? You get recommended these videos too. These videos from like Christ Will Save Your Soul on YouTube that just basically re-uploads documentaries, and some of them are really old, from like the mid-90s, where people are still like messing with mullets and stuff. And they're really just all about how somebody turned to the dark side. They, you know, the story is always the same. They were either like raised Christian, but they had this one nutty auntie that had a set of tarot cards and they got like roped in, or something really bad happened to them in their lives and they lost their sense of connection to Christ, and so they went down this dark road where they met with this coven, or they started like messing with the occult, and everything was great at first, and then everything went really hideously wrong, and then suddenly out of nowhere they were in despair and they were like making a pact with Satan, and then all of a sudden Christ came in and said, I forgive you, I love you, come back into the flock. And I've watched quite a few of these documentaries, and I've got to say, you know, these people, and it is largely women, although there are obviously some guys as well, but these people, these women, that I watch on these documentaries, they never ever, that I've ever seen on one of these documentaries, go into the craft for reasons that I would consider to be healthy and, you know, pretty much in alignment with what the craft is all about. They always say that their desire was for power, or their desire was to screw somebody over by doing a really heinous spell on them, or their desire was to kind of, it's always something to do with ego. It's always to do with ego, and it's not even as if you need to strip it back and analyse it and kind of put it through some sort of analysis paralysis machine. It's there on the surface. They never ever say things like, I just have this overwhelming sense that why the hell should God be male when everything else seems to be about spectrums and duality and intricacy and all that stuff. So as a woman, I thought to myself, why is God male? Why do I need to believe everything it says in this book? Why is God vengeful and hateful in this book? And why, when I connect to the earth and when I run my fingers through the grass and when I touch a tree, do I feel so much more of a sense of connection than I do in a church on Sunday? Now, see, these are reasons why a lot of witches turn to the craft in later life or whatever. But the reasons that they give in these documentaries are never like that, are they? They're always like, oh, I lost my house and I lost my husband and I decided that I hated God and then I wanted power and money and I turned to the craft and, you know, these women taught me how to get money and how to get everything I wanted, but it was all terrible, it was all rotten, it was all heinous and wrong, and then Christ thankfully kind of took me back in. And I think to myself that I never turned to the craft for that reason. It was never even a part of what I wanted for myself. I mean, I understood that I was divine in the pantheistic sense, and that I must be invested with divine power, the same as everything else in the universe. I must come from the same source in energy as everything else in the universe. You know, that, I suppose, in a sense, is about power and about being your own god, but not in a negative way, not to hurt anyone or to trample on anyone or to get more than I need. I'm a witch because of certain ethics that I hold and certain ways of seeing the world and viewing things that I have, and this certain sense that I'm just a drop in the big river of consciousness, as it were. And I want to operate from that sphere. I want to operate from that space. And you know, archetypes, symbols, theology, the magic that runs through everything. I mean, these reasons are never stated in these documentaries. These women always turn to the craft for shitty reasons, and they get burned because of those same shitty reasons, and then they want to turn around and say that it's about witchcraft and how we all need to kind of repent and turn to Christ, which is such a shame. And I've seen these documentaries, and I do think it's really funny because every time they give their reasons for moving into the craft, it's never the kind of reason that I could ever fathom, and therefore, you know, of course they didn't find what they wanted, and of course they had to return to Christ and kind of grovel and request forgiveness from him and re-enter the flock because everything had gone terribly wrong and they were burned by the big bad occult. And it's like, well, it really depends what perspective you go into it from, and it depends what you want from it. You know, if you want those things from it, then you are going to find yourself having a hard time, because those things are not expansive, and those things are not in alignment with knowledge and what it means to be knowledgeable, you know. So of course it's going to be difficult, and of course you're going to want to go back where you came from. But if you come into it with an open heart, with your soul really aligning and resonating with the word witch and resonating with what it means to cast a spell and all of that stuff, then it's going to go to good places. It's going to be a good exploration, and it's going to feed you. It's going to sustain you for the rest of your life and beyond. Oh, I need to get a new camera again. I realised that my battery was low, so I had to stop and have a little sort of intermission while I waited for my camera to do its thing, my battery to charge up. So I have drunk all my beer and I am on pint number 2, like you do. I've dedicated this entire day to making videos and blog posts and stuff like that, and it's going pretty well so far. It's lovely. And I got my paper chase stationery haul this morning, so that really was the icing on the cake. It's been an absolutely lovely day. How gorgeous it is outside, and how lovely it is talking to you guys about stuff especially stuff that's related to spirituality. There's naught more spiritual than a pint of beer, I'll tell you that. It's the nectar of the gods. I was personally not brought up under the umbrella of a specific religion, or even under the umbrella of a certain spiritual attitude or perspective, and I think that has given me so much freedom and so much permission to really just go after whatever, you know. I'm really interested in theology, I'm really interested in different religions. I love meeting Muslims who are willing to open up and talk about, like I have this one friend, and she's a Shia Muslim, and it's just fast, like she's so passionate and I'm so passionate, and like I love listening to her talk about, I just love asking her a question about something that I've read about Islam recently, and just asking her what she thinks, and she just like waxes lyrical and gets these massive downloads and just the devotion, you know. I relate to that. Like, I am not a Muslim and will never be a Muslim, and she's not a pagan and will never be a pagan, but I relate to her devotion. That's where we connect. And I absolutely love, without a shadow of a doubt, speaking with people from all different walks of life, all different religions, and I feel like I can connect with them on that level of devotion without any sense of them doing things the wrong way or me doing things the wrong way. It doesn't really work like that. It's just like both of us have this sense of something beyond, and through our different cultural guises and the things that we've picked up culturally and so on, we've come to these different ways of experiencing it. But when we talk about the experience itself, that's where the electricity is, and it runs through us all, and we can find ways to kind of tie each other in knots with it and have that devotional dance through conversation. And I just love that. And I've explored so many different things, and I'm not saying that you can't do that after coming out under the umbrella of a religion during your family life and during your upbringing, because of course you can, But I have been a qualified spiritual counsellor for quite some time now, and even before I qualified as a spiritual counsellor and branched out into coaching and mentoring and counselling sessions, I was reading tarot for a long time for people. And I can say with very great certainty that over and over again I've come across people who are struggling to establish their own sense of spiritual autonomy because they are trying so desperately to unshackle themselves from the chains of the religion in which they were raised. And it's so difficult even now for some people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s to convince themselves that they're not hellbound, even though they've completely left that paradigm behind. They know that it's got nothing to do with what they think of God or what they feel is holy in themselves. But it's so ingrained. It's so fucking ingrained, and they're absorbed by it. And they're really trying to just break out and do things on their own terms and see God in the terms that they favour, and to connect their sense of divinity and their sense of devotion with their own lives. And I think that's why I feel that I need to defend and fight the corner of people who want to combine some of their sense of who Jesus is and some of their sense of the tenements of Christianity with witchcraft as a blended path. The same way I would defend people who want to bring Lucifer into their path of witchcraft. I would, because I really feel that it's all metaphysics. Nobody fucking knows. Okay, nobody has the last word. So screw dogma and let's just get on with the practice of designing something that allows the individual to connect with what divinity really is for them. And I think that's why sometimes it's really the only thing that I will get involved in. I think, there's only really been two big debates that come up with any degree of regularity in the pagan community, online, in any sphere, YouTube or blogging or anywhere, that I'll get involved in. And it's charging for spiritual services and people bringing kind of some parts of their Christian paradigm into witchcraft or Wicca or whatever. And I just feel like with that second one, with both of them, it's about defending other people who feel they can't defend themselves, and it's about like bringing that other side of the coin to the equation. And I have made a pact with myself not to bother anymore. Like if people are bothered by someone walking a blended path, that's fine. But I really feel like I've just come across so many people during my practice as a spiritual counsellor that are just trying to get to a sense of what it means for them to connect with divinity, and far be it from me or anybody else to tell them that they can't do that. I mean, who are they hurting? Who are they hurting? I beg of you, tell me who they're hurting. I want to know. So yeah, like I will speak up for those people who are just trying to design something that's tailored to their specific needs, that maintains and fosters and bolsters those things that they did experience during the religion of childhood which do work for them, but actually reject those parts that don't work for them, that make them feel very kind of fractured or restrained, or as though they can't kind of connect with divinity adequately. I defend their right to develop something from the ground up that works for them. And from a metaphysical standpoint, as long as they're not hurting anybody else in doing that, then I genuinely don't see the issue, and I never will. And I have helped people to design a spiritual practice from the ground up that works for them, based on the fact that they find it very difficult to emancipate themselves from the chains of the religion in which they were raised. And I think it's so important, and it's such a great gift and a grand and glorious gift for people to be able to connect with God on their own terms and to find out what they think and feel. I could never, personally, this is a personal thing that I'm sharing with you now, and it's not something that I want to club anybody else over the head with, but I could never in 1,000,001 years raise my child under the guise of my religion, my spiritual perspective, or any other religion or spiritual perspective. I truly believe that you can have spiritual experiences as any kind of person, under the guise of any experience, and in any way that you see fit to do and that kind of calls to you. I would not think that I would need to shepherd my child through a process of learning about paganism and witchcraft in order for them to have a fulfilling spiritual or religious life. And if I was to do that, if I was to have children, which I don't plan on, but if I was to have children and then I was to raise them as pagan and as witches, and teach them about the sabbats and the esbats, and teach them about this, that and the other, and insist that they, read this or Phil Hine, or this is how you carve sacred space, or all of those things. If I was to raise them as under the umbrella of that spiritual perspective, then I would feel that what I'm really saying is that that's where the good stuff is. That's how you connect with divinity. That's how it really works. The way that I do it is how it really works. And actually that's not true, because I've spoken to Hindus and I've spoken to atheists and I've spoken to Shia Muslims and I've spoken to people who were raised under the guise of one and then converted to another in late life, and I've spoken to all kinds of different people who I know have connected with divinity on their terms. So why would I feel the need to railroad my child into my way of thinking and my way of being, especially as a spiritual counsellor? I've seen the damage that can do, and I've actively worked and given a great deal of my energy and a great deal of my love and compassion to reversing the damage that that's done. When parents have insisted on raising children with a particular paradigm, with a particular perspective on what God is or is not. So I would never judge friends of mine who do raise their children under the guise of a certain religion, but I personally, knowing what I know about how difficult it is to emancipate yourself later on if you have different ideas or a different way of connecting to God, it's tough, you know. I mean, enough people have employed me to help them do it. So I know that it's tough, and you know, for that reason and many other reasons, I wouldn't do it. It's not part of my nature to try and kind of, you know, I don't know, mould a child's spiritual experience. My spiritual experience was not moulded in any way, and I will talk more about that actually in another video, because my father had very good reasons for potentially considering moulding me into his way of being. Definitely. I mean, knowing about his history and how he was raised and how he suffered at the hands of the Catholic Church, it would be very easy for him to say, fuck that shit, I'm raising my kids atheist. But he didn't. He let me go to mass with my nana. He let me genuflect. He allowed me to light candles because I wanted to. And he recognised that there is no point in putting your baggage and your shit onto a child. Jung said that the greatest tragedy of the family, any family, is the unlived lives of the parents. And I think beyond that, the greatest tragedy of any family is just the projections of your parents, you know, because they project that shit onto you. And my father, for all of his faults, did not do that to me. He allowed me to grow up spiritually free-flowing and spiritually explorative and spiritually spontaneous and adventurous. You know, he let me taste from the whole of the cornucopia. And I am so, so grateful for that. I'm so grateful to be allowed to go into Catholic churches as a child and genuflect, even though neither of my parents were Catholic. I'm grateful to be able to accompany my nana and do those things, because I would not be a pagan witch now had I not have been permitted to do those things in a Catholic church as a child. And I know that. It was my first taste. It was my first taste of ritual. It was my first taste of devotion and statuettes and incense and candles and just, oh God, it made me come alive. It made me fucking come alive. And if my parents had railroaded me into atheism or railroaded me in any respect, then I wouldn't be where I am now, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now for a living. And I know that. So for me, spiritual freedom, spiritual autonomy is absolutely essential, and it starts young. It starts young, and if you start trying to put a framework for God over the eyes of a child at a young age, you have no idea of the untold damage you could potentially be doing, believe me. Because I have worked, in my line of work, I have worked to reverse that damage for a great many people, and it's incredibly difficult for them. So that's something that I would say, is that I would never raise a child under the guise of my spiritual perspective or under the framework of any religion. I really believe it's about finding your own way, and I always have, and my parents always said as much to me, and it's what I truly believe, and it's what has worked best for me. I must admit, I really am a great big mixer of pain as far as spirituality and religion and stuff goes. I am a full-on syncretist, and as far as I'm concerned, with regard to keeping things apart and never allowing things to touch in any way, I am just a full-on, I'm practically nihilistic when it comes to that stuff. I truly believe that it's a great big paint box. Metaphysics and theology and ideas about God, it's a great big fucking paint box, and the more mixed up those colours are in the water, the better for me. I just don't believe that there should be barriers, and I don't believe that I'm not entitled to mix religions with each other, and I can't believe that, and I never have been able to. But I am aware that a lot of other people are more traditionalist and more kind of orientated more in the classic part of the mind than in the romantic part of the mind, you know. So, you know, I am aware that I ruffle feathers when I talk about those things, but I'm just a full-on paradigm shifting, paradigm pirate, paradigm princess, like mashups be gone, like let's do this shit. And I just don't see that there's no other way for me, okay? I'm a syncretist. I'm unapologetic and unabashed about that. I will mix stuff up, okay? And I just will. And I'm not going to say sorry for it. With regard to cultural sensitivity and cultural appropriation, of course I have those kind of political awarenesses, and that is a part of what I would seek to, you know, to think about. But with regard to stuff like mixing certain paradigms together, for me, there's no one overarching truth. And if I'm just designing something that's my path, that's for me, if I'm not like starting a cult or a religion in which I'm going to try and convince other people to get on board, if it's just a path for me that involves what works for me, and what works for me happens to be, you know, Hindu deities, Christ and the Fae, then, you know, fuck everyone, I'm going to go for that. Like, that's really how I feel. I'm I'm a real spiritual anarchist. And a magical maverick, and always have been and always will be, and that's what floats my boat, and it's not what floats everyone's boat. But I do think dogma exists far and wide, not only in the dominant religions of any country, but dogma exists within the spectrum of witchcraft too. And I think, you know, there are many witches and many alternative spiritualists who do try to foist their ideas onto others, and I who's got time for that? I don't have time for that. I like it freewheeling and adventurous, and just get that paint box and just cram all that shit together and see what comes out. That's what I'm all about, and that's what I love. I never really, thinking about relationships, because I know that's something that a lot of people go through, is being with somebody, a partner or a husband, a spouse, like an other half, that doesn't share their spiritual perspective, or doesn't even share their sense of the importance of having any kind of spiritual life whatsoever. And that is sometimes a problem. When I suppose I had my first really serious boyfriend, in terms of when I look back now, what I would consider to be serious and what I would consider to have made a deep-seated impression upon me. I met him when I was 21. My first serious girlfriend, I was with her from the ages of like 15 to 19, so I guess it started out as something really intense and really kind of like, maybe a lot more, maybe it felt a lot more profound at the time than it did in hindsight. But, you know, by the time I was 19, I really did feel like, you know, it had been a long time and we'd been through a lot together, but we never really discussed God per se. She was an atheist, and I had other girlfriends after her and stuff, and we discussed time and existence and death and stuff, but never really spirituality per se. When I got with my first serious boyfriend at the age of 21, he had the Pagan Book of Living and Dying on his bookshelf, and, you know, a painting of an Ouroboros on his wall, and was very into thinking about spiritual stuff. So that was really useful for me, and I really started to awaken my sense of what it meant to be more open with others and with myself about what I was doing. So that was really exciting. When I broke up with him nearly 5 years down the line, I got with this guy who, really quickly after I first got with him, we had our first discussion about spirituality. He was raised in a fundamentalist Christian upbringing, which is actually quite rare for this country. It's really unusual to meet people who were born and raised on this side of the pond, who were like taken to see Benny Hinn as children, you know, and like had healings performed on them and stuff. It's really unusual to meet people who came from that paradigm, so that was quite kind of unusual for me. Having said that, he was very open and very kind of open-minded about religion and stuff, and he said that he did believe in something, but he was not in touch anymore with the paradigm in which he was raised. I told him about my spirituality, but the thing is, we had this conversation less than a month after we first got together, so I was cautious not to say everything and not to really freak him out and not to kind of plunge him in at the deep end, because I didn't even know how long me and this guy were going to last or anything. So I told him I was a pagan, and I told him that I was a pantheist, and explained a little bit about that, and he said, okay, I totally get that, and it seems like kind of, you know, similar to the kind of ideas that I have about divinity, and that was it. As we became kind of closer and started going out for a bit longer, after about the year kind of mark, I started talking to him about other things. You know, I started kind of putting into the conversation that I had read. I was reading books about witchcraft again, and I was kind of getting into this, that and the other. One night I told him that I was going to set up an altar, and I hadn't set up an altar for about A while. I had an altar pretty much the whole time I was with the boyfriend I was with before him, the really serious boyfriend. But then I went through that phase, I know I've spoken to you guys about it in videos before, where I became a little bit kind of nihilistic slash atheistic for a time. So I didn't have an altar. So I was saying to my boyfriend, I think I'm going to set up an altar. And he was very rude and very short about it and said, oh, I think I'd feel a bit weird if you had an altar in your room. And I said to him, okay, so let me get this straight. Your parents took you to a building every Sunday where a bloody, like, battered up, crucified guy was, like, lying there on a cross with nails through his hands and feet, surrounded by candles and God knows what, and a guy in a goddamn dress. But then when I want to put up an altar with, you know, some candles and shit on it, you think that's completely, like, out of the question. Basically just saying, look, you know, things are just as weird there as they are over here, honey. It's just that over here looks a bit different to what you're used to, but it's the same thing. Anyway, he continued to be short about it, and it was difficult. Anyway, we ended up getting into an argument, and I remember, like, picking up... I randomly, like, walked through my room to leave my room, and I picked up Contemporary Paganism by Gray and Harvey off of my bookshelf. I grabbed it, I turned around, and I threw it at my boyfriend. And I said, read that, because that shit was around a long time before you came into my life, honey, and it'll be around a long time after you leave. I just wore, like, head jived and then walked out. I was so angry. We'd argued for I'd say a good 40 minutes. And I was infuriated because I knew that he was just not going to accept that I was a witch, and he was not going to accept that I wanted an altar, and he was, you know, he was happy enough to talk about conceptually what pantheism means, but then later on down the line, when I wanted to get into a discussion with him about what my spirituality really meant to me and what it entailed, no dice, and it hurt me. It did. So when I got with my boyfriend that I'm with now, I wanted to get it out of the way pretty quickly, and I wanted to be full on this time to make sure that I didn't end up in another situation where I was with a guy who wouldn't accept it or who felt funny about it. I really wanted to avoid that, okay? So when I got with Danny, I told him pretty early on what I was all about, and I was like, look, I'm a witch. I'm a pantheist, pagan, chaos witch. I visit Stonehenge every single summer solstice. I read tarot, and I really just, like, got it all out. And it actually turned out to be fine because his mother was very into alternative spirituality. She'd spent some time studying Buddhism and paganism, and she had a large collection of crystals. She had oracle cards, angel cards. So actually it turned out being a really good thing, and really, like, I was quite fortunate in that way. But it really did, kind of at the beginning, it made me go in there because of that negative experience I'd had with this boyfriend before. He and I broke up shortly after. I realised that he wasn't going to accept. I mean, it wasn't the only reason, but it was one of a number of reasons. I kind of knew, like, when I get with somebody again, guy, girl, whatever, wherever they are on the spectrum, gender-wise, they're going to know. They're going to know. They're going to be told in advance, and they're going to have to be cool with it. I'm going to come out with it. I'm going to say it. So I did, and fortunately everything was okay with regard to that. Danny was already, you know, well aware of what witchcraft is and what paganism is, and it was cool. But yeah, I have had that difficulty. I did have that difficulty with this past boyfriend of mine, and it was hurtful. And I really admire people, you know, that stay in marriages for years and years and years where they never really talk about spirituality or religion because they just point blank don't agree, and whenever they get into a conversation they argue. Because I couldn't really be in that kind of relationship. I wouldn't be in that kind of relationship. It really wouldn't flick my switch. I don't need somebody that I'm with to be pagan or a witch or whatever, but, you know, I'd be cool if they're atheist, it's fine, but I wouldn't be able to deal with the kind of relationship where I felt that my beliefs weren't accepted or that my beliefs were making my partner roll their eyes. Like, I couldn't deal with that. There's no way. Some people seem to think that the burden of proof is upon me to kind of, like, explain and rationalise and, you know, kind of spoon feed my spiritual beliefs to them. I've had people say underneath videos like, oh, you seem like a really logical person with a lot of intellect, like how can you possibly worship an ancient Norse goddess? It doesn't make any sense, kind of thing. Like, is it just because you want a feeling of belonging, or are you just playing at it and you don't really believe it? You know, I will get into discussions about this stuff. It's not like I think people are being rude necessarily, but I do think it's very important for people to come to this kind of dialogue with the understanding that the burden of proof is not upon me. It's not my responsibility to provide an explanation that is satisfactory to somebody else as to why I do or do not believe something. My spiritual path is my own, and the reason that I put some of it online and talk about it and create instructional videos about it is to enjoy community with other people who have an alternative spiritual path of any kind, and also to learn and to teach and so on and so forth. It's not to convert, it's not to convince, and I think that's something that it's really important for people to realise is I don't feel any pressure of the burden of proof or the burden of legitimising what I'm doing by explaining how it is rational and it is logical and it does make sense. I don't care whether or not somebody thinks it's rational or logical or makes sense. You know, I really don't mind what they think of my spiritual journey. It's fine. I'm not on any great crusade to make people believe what I believe or to make people think that it's okay for me to believe what I believe. I'm really not in the market for trying to make people understand or help people to see how it's right for me to do what I'm doing or think what I'm thinking. I just do it. I do it for me, and I'm kind of not going to trip over myself and stumble over myself trying to make atheists and cynics and people who think it's funny come to terms with it or feel more comfortable with it. They don't need to feel more comfortable with it. If they don't want to watch videos about my spiritual journey, they can click off onto another channel and watch something else. You know, nobody's kind of forcing them with a gun to their head to watch my videos, and if they were, that would be really weird. So, you know, I really do think when it comes to the burden of proof, if you ever feel like somebody is trying to say, well, explain why, or explain how, or explain how it all fits together, or it just seems weird to me, you know, like, explain to me what's going on. I just want to say, don't drain yourself and go balls to the wall trying to explain this stuff, because really, in the end, nobody knows what the truth is about God. Nobody knows what's beyond death. Nobody knows any of that stuff. Everybody's just got their own perspective and they're filtering everything through their own consciousness. And I have really no overwhelming desire to make sure that atheists or cynics are comfortable with my choices. The most important thing is that I'm comfortable with my choices, and as a spiritual counsellor, my role is additionally to ensure that other people can find a place on the spectrum where they are comfortable with their choices and where they're expressing their ideas about divinity in a way that fits for them. You know, that's what's more important to me than expending a great deal of energy trying to convince somebody who seems to think themselves more rational and more logical that what I'm doing is rational and logical. You know, to an extent, nothing really metaphysical can be tied up with what's rational and logical, but does that really matter ultimately? Before I end this video, I just want to say, I know I talked a little bit about humour, having a sense of humour, and how I laugh with my best friend and my boyfriend sometimes about certain aspects of my spiritual path and stuff. I showed my best friend the video, Shit New Age Chicks Say, or New Age Girls Say, I can't remember which it is now. I'll link it below. It's actually been created by somebody, by a woman who's following an alternative spiritual path and would consider herself to be New Age. But she's kind of self-deprecating, right? She's taking the piss out of herself. And I showed this video to my best friend and she thought it was fucking hilarious because so much of the stuff she says in that video is stuff that I say. Especially the stuff about downloads, like, oh, I'm so getting a download right now. Like, I do say that. I mean, a lot of the stuff in that video is stuff that I say, let's pull a card right now. So that's the kind of thing I mean by being self-deprecating and allowing yourself to laugh at what your spiritual journey might look like from an outside perspective and how it might be quite amusing. The same with the JP Sears video that went round, the ultra spiritual video that went viral, which I'll also link below. If anyone's not seen it yet, you should definitely watch it. It's so funny. And I think there is a great deal of room for taking your path seriously and being present and being aware of how intrinsic it is to your life, but also at the same time allowing yourself to be lighthearted about it and just finding those areas where you can find it amusing and have your friends and your boyfriend or whoever find it endearing. You know, it is endearing and it's a very important part of my life, but it's not something that I would say I'm anal about or uptight about. You know, I wouldn't want that. I get a great deal of joy out of my spirituality, and so I want to approach it in a way that is joyful and in a way that does involve my inner child, you know, and my inner joker. So I guess I'll leave it here. I know this was, I mean, it was always, the plan was always to make this into a really rambly video, so I know it's going to be long. And I hope that you guys got something out of just sitting here with me and relaxing with me on this gorgeous summer afternoon. And yeah, very much love, and thanks for listening, guys. And please post your perspectives below on anything that I've talked about, and let me know what the spiritual journey has been like for you. And very much love. Blessed be.